All right, so the most common mistakes. So these are the three that I identified. Too much text, visuals don't add value, and not enough white space. And I'll talk a little bit about each one and show you some examples. So too much text is kind of an obvious one. I think we've all been in presentations where there's been way too much text on the slide. So my tip here is just limit your text and bullet points. So here's a really poor example. And this is just a screenshot that I grabbed. But you can see a lot of text. It's actually pixelated too, so it's hard to read. So just not good. Here's one that I created. So at least the text is easy to read and clear, but there's a lot of it. And then sometimes we do this. We add backgrounds, which maybe don't really help. They don't help us help it make it more readable. But here's an example of a presentation that does a nice job. So this is actually me sitting in a presentation, reflecting on what I'm seeing. And I actually pulled out my phone and took a picture of it because I really liked what this presenter did. And this was a presentation that I was at in Indianapolis. The presenter's name was Dan Meyer. He's a math teacher. And I just love this. He had 5 bullet points or 5 items, and each one had 2 words: identify variables, formulate models. And I went to this presentation years ago. I've talked about this slide several times, so that helps me remember it. But those ideas, because he was able to limit his text and bullet points, those ideas really stuck with me. So I think it's important to just really try to limit your text. Here's a great quote from Thomas Jefferson: most valuable of all talents is that of never using 2 words when one will do. Being concise and succinct is sometimes more challenging than putting lots of words on the screen, but it really does make a difference. So the mistake is adding too much text and having too many bullets. So you really want to try to limit that. And then this is the question that I try to get people to think about: can I be more concise? Read, put your slide together, read it, and then just ask yourself, could I be a little more concise here? And then the second mistake is oftentimes we see presentations where visuals are just put in there just to be put in there. There's no real value. So here's an example. Here's a poor example that I put together. The most important thing on this screen is the objective for the day, which is to learn about order of operations. But I got all sorts of stuff going on here. My name, my class period, some cheesy clip art. So if I start to get rid of some of these things, the learner can really focus on what's important. I don't need all of this extra stuff. And maybe this is all I really need. Today, we're going to learn order of operations. And adding visuals can help in terms of keeping students or your students or your audience engaged, but you just want to make sure you're adding visuals that really add value. So here's another example. If this was your slide, you're going to talk about a project. It's going to last 3 weeks. If the project is about growing flowers, maybe it makes sense. But if it isn't, then I would say that adding a flower to this slide is just, it isn't adding value. This would be an example of adding value, because this calendar, especially if I had 3 weeks highlighted, would help drive home your point. So the text and the visual kind of go together. So that's the second tip to avoid that mistake. And then the third one, and here's the question, what point am I trying to get across? So look at your slide and just ask yourself that question. And then the third one is, this is one that really resonates, or maybe this really comes to life for my students in this graduate class I teach, and that is utilizing white space. So if you haven't had formal training in graphic design or visual design, just that whole concept of white space can be new to you. So here's a slide that I put together. It's got lots of information about DSU, but you'll notice everything is kind of jammed together. And this is very common when people put together visuals. They feel like, well, if there's room on the slide, I need to put something in, I need to fill it up, I need to put something in there. So white space doesn't have to be white. It's just the space around the objects. It's the space between the image and the edge of the slide. It's the space between your bullet points. So if I change this and add white space, I'm going to let you see what happens. So I got rid of the logo, but I added space around everything. And now it's so much easier to read. So we went from this to this, and really all I did was give all the items a little more space. So utilizing white space. And then the question I tell people to ask themselves is this: can the items on my slide breathe? If they're all jammed together, that makes it really difficult. So those are my those are my tips. Those are my tips, or those are the common mistakes and some tips to kind of address those things.